Captain Marcus Chen had seen many strange things during his 15 years of deep space exploration, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight before him. The Zephyrian Royal Transport ship hung motionless in the void, its crystalline hull fractured and bleeding atmosphere into the star-speckled darkness. Emergency beacons pulsed weakly from the dying vessel, their alien frequency patterns barely registering on his ship's outdated translation systems. "This is Captain Chen of the Earth vessel times Wanderer Asterisk," he transmitted on all frequencies. "We're receiving your distress signal. Do you require assistance? Me. Do you? The response came in a cascade of musical tones that his computer struggled to decipher. When the translation finally appeared on his screen, Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. The message was from Princess Lirelei of the Zephyrian Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in known space. More importantly, she was alone, stranded, and asking for help from a human, a species most galactic powers considered barely above barbaric. Marcus had always been told that Zephyrians were impossibly advanced beings, with technology that bordered on magic and intellects that could process information faster than any human computer. They lived for thousands of years and governed star systems with wisdom accumulated over millennia. The idea that one of them, especially royalty, would need help from someone like him seemed absurd. But here he was, watching her ship slowly tear itself apart while she waited for his answer. "Princess, this is Captain Chen. I'm coming aboard to assist. Please prepare for docking." The next hour tested every skill Marcus had learned in his years of emergency rescues. The Zephyrian ship's docking systems were completely foreign to him, operating on principles of energy manipulation that human science barely understood. But Marcus had always been good at improvising, and desperation had a way of making the impossible seem merely difficult. When he finally managed to breach the ship's emergency airlock, the sight that greeted him challenged everything he thought he knew about the galaxy's most revered species. Princess Lirelei sat huddled in what remained of the command chamber, her translucent blue skin pale with shock and her enormous silver eyes filled with something Marcus had never expected to see in a Zephyrian fear. She was smaller than he had imagined, barely reaching his shoulder, with delicate features that seemed almost fragile despite the subtle luminescence that marked her as one of the galaxy's energy-manipulating species. Her royal robes were torn and singed, and the complex geometric patterns that covered her arms, marks of her royal lineage, flickered weakly as her energy reserves depleted. "You came," she whispered, in accented but clear English, apparently having learned the language from her ship's computers during the long wait. "I did not think a human would risk themselves for someone like me." Marcus felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. Despite everything he had been told about Zephyrian superiority, the being before him looked like nothing more than a scared young person far from home. "Everyone deserves help when they need it," he said simply. "Can you walk? We need to get you to my ship before yours comes apart completely." The journey to the Times Wanderer Times revealed just how damaged the princess truly was. Not just her ship, her own energy matrix had been disrupted by whatever had attacked her transport. She moved slowly, leaning heavily on Marcus's arm, her usual ability to float gracefully through the air completely gone. "I must apologize," she said as they reached the safety of his ship. I am not what you probably expected of my people." Marcus helped her to the small medical bay, his mind racing as he tried to figure out how to treat an alien whose biology was completely foreign to him. "What do you mean? What do you mean?" Lirelei's laugh was bitter, tinged with something Marcus recognized as self-doubt. "I am what your people might call a failure. Among my kind, I am considered weak, unable to master even the most basic energy manipulation techniques that children learn. My advisors say, I think too much like a human." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Here was a member of a species that looked down on humanity, telling him she was considered inferior because she thought like one of his kind. "And why is that bad?" "Because humans are primitive," she said automatically, then caught herself, looking embarrassed. "That is what I was taught. You rely on crude tools and simple machines instead of pure energy manipulation." You solve problems through trial and error rather than calculating the perfect solution. You are chaotic and unpredictable. Marcus busied himself with the medical scanner, trying to understand the readouts that made no sense when applied to Zephyrian physiology. And yet here you are, alive because one of those primitive humans decided to help you. She fell silent at that, watching him work with an expression of curiosity that seemed unusual for someone supposedly far above his intellectual level. Marcus found himself explaining what he was doing as he went, partly to fill the silence, and partly because he sensed she genuinely wanted to understand. The thing about humans, he said as he rigged up a makeshift energy field generator to help stabilize her condition, is that we don't always need to understand something perfectly to make it work. Sometimes good enough is, well, good enough. To his surprise, Lirelei laughed a genuine sound this time. My tutors would be horrified to hear that philosophy. They believe that anything worth doing must be done with absolute precision and complete understanding. And how has that worked out for you so far? She considered this for a moment. Not very well, apparently. I have been studying energy manipulation for over a century, and I still cannot achieve what others master in decades. Perhaps there is something to be said for the human approach. That conversation marked the beginning of something neither of them had expected. With the princess's ship completely destroyed and the nearest Zephyrian outpost weeks away, Marcus found himself with an extended house guest who was nothing like what he had been told to expect from her species. Lirelei was curious about everything, asking questions that ranged from how his primitive engines functioned to why humans seemed to find humor in the most inappropriate situations. She watched him repair systems with fascination, noting how he combined technical knowledge with intuition and creativity in ways that her formal education had never taught her to appreciate. Your people approach problems so differently, she observed on their third day together, as Marcus jerry-rigged a solution to a failing environmental system using parts from 3 different machines. You do not calculate the optimal solution. You find a solution that works and move forward. Sometimes the optimal solution takes too long to find, Marcus replied, wiping grease from his hands. And sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes you just have to try things and see what happens. This concept seemed to fascinate her. Zephyrian education, she explained, was based on the idea that there was always a perfect solution to any problem, and that the goal was to discover it through careful analysis and energy manipulation. The idea of deliberately choosing an imperfect solution because it was faster or more practical was completely foreign to her. But as the days passed, Marcus began to see why she had been considered a failure by her people's standards. Lirelei's approach to problems was indeed more human-like than Zephyrian. Where others of her species might spend days calculating the perfect energy matrix to accomplish a task, she wanted to experiment, to try different approaches and learn from the results. Show me how you would solve this, Marcus said one day, presenting her with a broken communication array. Instead of immediately beginning the complex energy calculations her training demanded, she examined the device with her hands, turning it over and studying its construction. This component is damaged, she said, pointing to a crystalline structure that had been cracked during their escape. But if I bypass it entirely and route the signal through these secondary channels, her solution wasn't elegant by Zephyrian standards, but it worked. More importantly, she had found it by thinking like a human engineer rather than an energy manipulation specialist. That was remarkably inefficient, she said afterwards, but she was smiling. And yet it accomplished the goal in a fraction of the time my traditional approach would have required. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying their conversations. Lirelei had a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor that emerged once she stopped trying to be the perfect Zephyrian princess. She was also surprisingly practical, despite her royal upbringing. Your people fascinate me, she admitted as they shared dinner on their 10th day together. Everything I was taught suggested that humans were little better than clever animals, solving problems through brute force rather than true understanding. But you understand things differently than we do, not less than we do. Different how? She gestured to the improvised repairs visible throughout the ship's common area. You understand that perfection can be the enemy of progress. You understand that sometimes a solution that works immediately is better than a perfect solution that takes forever to implement. You understand that failure is not shameful if you learn from it. These were concepts that Zephyrian society, with its emphasis on perfection and predetermined solutions, struggled with. Their advanced civilization had achieved incredible heights, but it had also become somewhat rigid in its thinking. As their journey continued, Marcus began to understand that Lyralay's supposed weakness was actually a different kind of strength. She could think outside the parameters of traditional Zephyrian problem-solving because her mind worked more like a human's, adaptable, creative, willing to accept imperfect solutions if they moved things forward. "I have a confession," she told him on their 15th day together. "I was not being entirely truthful about my situation when you rescued me." Marcus looked up from the engine calibrations he was running. "Oh? Well," he said, "my ship was not attacked by raiders, as I told you. It was sabotaged by members of my own court who believed I was unfit to rule." She met his eyes steadily. "They were probably right, by traditional Zephyrian standards. I lack the perfect control and unwavering certainty that my people expect from their leaders. And yet here you are, alive and adapting to circumstances that would probably overwhelm someone with rigid thinking," Marcus pointed out. She smiled sadly. "Perhaps. But survival and leadership are different things. When we reach the Zephyrian outpost, I will likely face formal charges of incompetence. The evidence of my ship's destruction will be seen as proof that I cannot handle responsibility." Marcus found himself surprisingly angry at the injustice of it. In the time they had spent together, the R-Line H, he had come to respect Lyralay's intelligence and resourcefulness. She might approach problems differently than other Zephyrians, but that didn't make her approach wrong. "Maybe the problem isn't with you," he suggested. "Maybe the problem is with a system that can't recognize different kinds of strength." Oh. This conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Lyralay began to open up about the pressures she faced as a member of Zephyrian royalty, expected to embody perfection while struggling with her own more human-like approach to thinking and problem-solving. Marcus, for his part, found himself seeing the galaxy's power structures in a new light. If someone as intelligent and capable as Lyralay could be considered a failure simply because she thought differently, what did that say about the wisdom of the civilizations that considered humans primitive? Their 20th day together brought an unexpected test of their growing partnership. The Wanderer's Times main computer suffered a cascade failure that threatened to leave them stranded in deep space. The problem was complex, requiring both technical knowledge and the kind of energy manipulation that only a Zephyrian could provide. "I cannot fix this using traditional methods," Lyralay admitted after studying the damaged systems. "The energy matrices are too complex, and I lack the precision control required." "Then don't use traditional methods," Marcus suggested. "Use human methods." Working together, they developed a hybrid approach that combined Marcus's practical engineering knowledge with Lyralay's energy manipulation abilities. Instead of trying to achieve perfect control, she learned to work with imprecise, good enough solutions that could be adjusted and refined over time. The repair took 3 days of trial and error, false starts, and creative problem-solving. By Zephyrian standards, it was an embarrassing display of inefficiency. By human standards, it was a masterpiece of adaptive engineering. "I have learned more in these past weeks than in a century of formal education," Lyralay said, as they watched the repaired systems come online. "You have shown me that there is strength in adaptability, wisdom in acknowledging imperfection, and honor in choosing practical solutions over theoretical ideals." Marcus felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. Pride in what they had accomplished together, and sadness because he knew their time was almost over. The Zephyrian outpost was now only a few days away, and once they reached it, Lyralay would return to a world that might not appreciate the lessons she had learned. "What will you do when we reach the outpost?" he asked. Lyralay was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. Face the charges against me, I suppose. Accept whatever punishment the council decides upon. That's not the Lirelei I've come to know, Marcus said. The person I know would find a third option, something her accusers hadn't considered. She smiled at that, but it didn't reach her eyes. Perhaps, but change comes slowly to my people, and I am still just one voice against centuries of tradition. As they prepared for their final approach to the Zephyrian outpost, neither of them realized that their 100 days together had set in motion changes that would reshape not just their own lives, but the relationship between their entire species. The lessons learned in the depths of space were about to collide with the rigid certainties of galactic civilization. And nothing would ever be the same. The Zephyrian outpost times, luminous harmony times, appeared on their sensors like a crystalline flower blooming in the darkness of space. Its bioluminescent walls pulsed with patterns of light that served as both decoration and communication, creating a display of beauty that took Marcus's breath away. But as they approached the massive structure, he could feel tension radiating from Lirelei like heat from a furnace. They know we are coming, she said, reading the light patterns with practiced ease. The council has already convened to hear my case. They are not pleased. Marcus watched as sleek Zephyrian interceptors moved to escort them to a docking bay. The ships were works of art, their hulls flowing like liquid metal and propelled by energy fields that left no visible exhaust. Compared to them, his battered times, wanderer times, looked like exactly what it was, a primitive human vessel held together by ingenuity and stubborn determination. You don't have to face this alone, he said. I'll come with you to the council. Lirelei's expression was grateful but resigned. You do not understand what you are offering. The High Council of Zephyrian nobles has never allowed a human to address them directly. They consider your species, too, unpredictable for formal discourse. Then maybe it's time they learned something new about unpredictability. The docking procedures were unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Instead of mechanical clamps and pressure seals, the station seemed to embrace his ship with fields of energy, creating a seamless connection that felt more like being absorbed than docked. Zephyrian attendants floated through the air with casual grace, their movements guided by their natural ability to manipulate gravitational fields. Marcus felt distinctly out of place as they disembarked, his heavy footsteps echoing awkwardly against the station's crystalline floors, while Lirelei moved with the silent elegance of her people. The other Zephyrians they passed stopped to stare, their large silver eyes reflecting curiosity and disdain in equal measure. Princess Lirelei, a tall, imposing figure, glided toward them, his formal robes marking him as a high-ranking official. The council awaits your presence. As for your companion, arrangements have been made for appropriate accommodations. Captain Chen will accompany me to the council chamber, Lirelei said firmly. He has been instrumental in my survival and has valuable insights to offer. The official's luminescent skin patterns flickered with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as the Zephyrian equivalent of raised eyebrows. Princess, the council specifically requested that you appear alone. The presence of a human in our deliberations would be most irregular. Many things about this situation are irregular, Counselor Veltar. I believe that is precisely why Captain Chen's perspective would be valuable. The walk to the council chamber gave Marcus his first real look at Zephyrian society. The station was a marvel of organic architecture, its walls and corridors grown rather than built, shaped by the collective will of energy manipulators into forms that were both functional and beautiful. Gardens floated in midair, tended by beings whose touch could encourage growth at the molecular level. Information flowed through living data streams that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. But for all its beauty, Marcus sensed an underlying rigidity to the place. Everything was perfect, ordered, designed according to principles that had been established centuries ago. There was no room for improvisation, no tolerance for the kind of creative chaos that he had come to appreciate in human spaces. The council chamber was breathtaking, a vast spherical room where the members floated at various levels, their positions indicating rank and specialty. Energy fields created perfect acoustics and translation, allowing all to hear and be heard regardless of their location within the space. At the center, a single platform waited for the accused, Princess Lirelei of the Third Radiance. The chief counselor's voice resonated through the chamber with the authority of centuries. You stand before us charged with gross incompetence in your duties, as evidenced by the destruction of the royal transport times, stellar grace times, and the loss of your diplomatic mission to the Andromedian coalition. Marcus watched from the designated observer area as Lirelei took her place on the central platform. She looked small and isolated in the vast space, surrounded by beings whose power made the very air shimmer with potential energy. The charges against you are severe, another counselor continued. Your handling of the diplomatic mission showed the same reckless disregard for proper procedure that has marked your entire career. Your inability to master even basic energy manipulation techniques has brought shame upon your lineage. And now, the destruction of a royal vessel under your command proves conclusively that you lack the judgment necessary for leadership. Honored counselors. Lirelei's voice was steady, despite the overwhelming nature of her situation. I do not dispute that my ship was lost, but I ask you to consider the circumstances of that loss and what I learned during my time stranded in space. You learned nothing that a century of proper education could not have taught you more efficiently, scoffed Counselor Zethra, her energy field crackling with dismissive power. Your time among the humans has only reinforced your tendency toward primitive thinking patterns. That was when Marcus stood up. With respect, Counselor, I don't think you understand what primitive thinking actually looks like. The reaction in the chamber was immediate and electric. Energy fields flared as the assembled nobles reacted to the unprecedented intrusion of a human voice in their formal proceedings. Several counselors began speaking at once, their voices overlapping in a cascade of outrage and disbelief. How dare you? Counselor Veltar's patterns blazed with fury. This sacred chamber has never been polluted by enough. The chief counselor's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The human will be removed immediately. Wait, Lirelei's voice rang out clear and strong. By the ancient laws of our people, I have the right to present evidence in my defense. Captain Chen is my evidence. The chamber fell silent. Ancient law was something even the most tradition-bound counselor could not dismiss lightly. Explain, the chief counselor said curtly. You charge me with incompetence because I think differently than our traditions demand. You say, my approach to problem-solving is flawed because it resembles human methodology. Captain Chen is living proof that human methodology is not inferior to ours, merely different. And sometimes, that difference is exactly what is needed. Marcus felt every eye in the chamber upon him as Lirelei gestured for him to speak. He had addressed hostile audiences before, but never ones that could literally disintegrate him with a thought. Counselors, he began, his voice carrying clearly in the perfect acoustics. In that time, I watched her solve problems that would have stumped most of my fellow humans. She learned to adapt, to improvise, to find solutions that weren't perfect but worked when perfection was impossible. Improvisation is the refuge of inferior minds, Counselor Zethra interjected coldly. Is it? Marcus challenged. Your princess's ship was sabotaged by members of her own court members who presumably possessed all the traditional Zephyrian virtues you value. Their perfect planning, their superior energy manipulation, their adherence to proper procedure. And what did those virtues accomplish? They nearly murdered a member of your royal family. The energy levels in the chamber spiked dangerously as several counselors reacted to the accusation. Marcus pressed on, knowing he might not get another chance. Princess Lirelei survived because she could adapt. She learned to work with technology she didn't understand, to find solutions that weren't in any textbook, to trust someone from a species she was taught to consider inferior. That's not weakness, that's the kind of strength your people are going to need if you want to survive in a galaxy that doesn't always follow your rules. You speak of survival, the chief counselor said, his tone dangerously quiet. Yet, It was human primitiveness that necessitated survival in the first place. A properly functioning Zephyrian vessel would never have failed so catastrophically. Marcus smiled grimly. Respectfully, counselor, that's exactly the kind of thinking that almost got your princess killed. The belief that your technology, your methods, your people are inherently superior to everyone else's. But superiority that can't adapt is just another form of weakness. You dare lecture us on weakness? Counselor Veltar's energy field began to take on a distinctly hostile coloration. I'm not lecturing anyone. I'm telling you what I observed. Your princess, who you consider a failure, managed to survive situations that would have killed most people. Zephyrian, or human. She did it by learning to think outside the boundaries your culture placed on her thinking. Marcus gestured to the floating display screens that showed the remains of Lyralei's ship. The saboteurs who destroyed her transport used traditional Zephyrian methods: perfect planning, flawless execution, elegant solutions designed to leave no trace. It would have worked perfectly, except for one thing: they didn't account for human stubbornness. Stubbornness is hardly a virtue, Counselor Zethra said disdainfully. Isn't it? I saw a distress signal from a species that considers mine barely civilized. Every practical consideration said I should ignore it: too dangerous, too complicated, too likely to end badly. But humans have this annoying habit of helping people who need help, even when it doesn't make logical sense. Especially when it doesn't make logical sense. The chamber was completely silent now, the energy fields of the counselors fluctuating as they processed this unexpected perspective. During our time together, Marcus continued, Princess Lyralei told me about Zephyrian society, how every problem has an optimal solution, how perfection is always preferable to adequacy, how tradition provides tested answers to every question. It sounds wonderful in theory, but what happens when you encounter a problem that doesn't have an optimal solution? What happens when perfection takes too long, and adequacy is what you need right now? What happens when tradition doesn't have an answer? Ray. Wah. Ray. Wah. Wah. He looked directly at the chief counselor. What happens is that people like Princess Lyralei, people who can think differently, who can adapt and improvise and accept imperfect solutions, become your greatest assets instead of your greatest embarrassments. You suggest that our entire civilization is flawed because it does not embrace chaos and unpredictability? The chief counselor's tone was ice cold. I'm suggesting that any civilization that can't learn from other species is limiting itself unnecessarily, Marcus replied. Your princess learned human methods and became stronger for it. She didn't become less Zephyrian. She became a better Zephyrian. Lyralei stepped forward. Honored counselors, Captain Chen speaks truly. Not because I abandoned our ways, but because I learned to apply them differently. She gestured, and the air around her began to shimmer with controlled energy fields. But instead of the precise, geometric patterns favored by traditional Zephyrian technique, her manipulations had a flowing, improvisational quality that seemed to dance rather than calculate. This is not the energy work you taught me, she said, as the patterns grew more complex and beautiful. It incorporates human principles of adaptation and creativity. It may not be perfect by our traditional standards, but it is uniquely mine, and it works. The display was magnificent, showing an entirely new approach to energy manipulation that none of the counselors had seen before. It was recognizably Zephyrian in its fundamental structure, but enhanced by concepts of flexibility and creative problem-solving that were distinctly human in origin. Impossible, whispered Counselor Zethra. Such techniques should not function without proper mathematical foundations. And yet they do function, Lyralei said, letting the patterns fade. Because human thinking taught me that sometimes the universe cares more about what works than what should work according to theory. The chief counselor was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying both Lyralei and Marcus with new interest. You present us with a disturbing proposition, Princess. You suggest that our centuries of accumulated wisdom are incomplete. Not incomplete, Lirelei said carefully. Enhanced. Human methods don't replace Zephyrian knowledge, they complement it. Together, they create possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. And what, precisely, do you propose we do with this revelation? Marcus felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Everything that happened next would determine not just Lirelei's fate, but the future relationship between their species. I propose that we establish a cultural exchange program, Lirelei said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. Send Zephyrian students to learn human methods of problem solving. Invite human engineers to study our energy manipulation techniques. Create joint research projects that combine our strengths instead of ignoring our differences. You would have us learn from primitives? Counselor Veltar sounded scandalized. I would have us learn from anyone who has something to teach, Lirelei replied firmly. Captain Chen saved my life, using techniques that our science says should not work. His ship flies using engines that violate our understanding of efficient energy use. His people solve problems in ways that our education never prepared us to understand. And yet all of these things are real and effective. She turned to address the full council. For too long, we have assumed that our way is the only way, that perfection is always preferable to adequacy, that tradition provides all the answers we need. But the galaxy is changing, and species that cannot adapt will be left behind. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Marcus could feel the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on the chamber, warring with the undeniable evidence of what they had just witnessed. Finally, the chief counselor spoke. The charges against you are dismissed, Princess Lirelei. Your survival and adaptation in unprecedented circumstances demonstrate competence, not failure. Relief flooded through Marcus, but the chief counselor wasn't finished. Furthermore, we accept your proposal for a limited cultural exchange program. You will lead this initiative, working with Captain Chen and other humans to develop new approaches to interspecies cooperation. Honored Chief Counselor, Counselor Zethra interjected. Surely such a radical departure from our traditions requires more deliberation. The deliberation is complete, the Chief Counselor said firmly. We have seen the evidence with our own eyes. The princess has demonstrated abilities that our traditional methods could not develop. The human has shown insights that our education could not provide. To ignore such evidence would be the height of arrogance. As the council formally adjourned, Marcus found himself surrounded by Zephyrian nobles, who had previously looked at him with disdain but now regarded him with curious respect. The change wasn't universal. Some still clearly considered him an unwelcome intrusion, but others seemed genuinely intrigued by the possibilities he represented. You realize what you have done, do you not? Counselor Veltar approached him, his energy field still showing signs of agitation. You have fundamentally altered the course of our civilization. Well, I just told the truth, Marcus replied. What you do with it is up to you. Lirelei appeared at his side, her face glowing with an expression of triumph and disbelief. They accepted it, she whispered. They actually accepted it. They actually. Of course they did, Marcus said with a grin. You gave them something they've never had before. A new perspective on old problems. That's always valuable, even when it comes from primitives like us. But even as they celebrated this victory, both of them knew that the real work was just beginning. Changing hearts and minds was one thing. Changing the fundamental structure of galactic civilization would be something else entirely. 6 months after the trial that shook the foundations of Zephyrian society, the transformation was already visible across multiple star systems. The cultural exchange program that Princess Lirelei and Captain Marcus Chen had proposed was producing results that defied every prediction made by both human and alien social scientists. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the new Joint Research Station Times. Convergence **. Watching human engineers work alongside Zephyrian energy manipulators to construct ships that combine the best of both technologies. The sight still amazed him, humans with their tool belts and diagnostic equipment collaborating with beings who could reshape matter with thought alone. The third prototype achieved a 97% increase in efficiency over traditional human designs. "Doctor," Sarah Kim reported, her voice crackling with excitement as she joined him at the observation window. "And it's using only 60% of the energy that pure Zephyrian technology would require." The ships being built in the construction bay below looked like nothing that had existed before in galactic history. They retained the elegant curves and bioluminescent patterns that marked Zephyrian aesthetic sensibilities. But their internal systems showed clear signs of human influence. Redundant backups, modular components that could be field repaired, and control interfaces designed for beings who couldn't manipulate energy fields with their minds. "How are the cultural integration classes going?" Marcus asked. Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "Better than anyone expected, actually. The Zephyrian students are fascinating to work with. They learn our techniques incredibly quickly once they get past the idea that imperfection is acceptable, and our people are adapting to energy manipulation concepts faster than the Zephyrians thought possible." Through the transparent walls of the station, Marcus could see groups of mixed species engaged in joint problem-solving exercises. Human students learned to work with energy field generators while their Zephyrian counterparts practiced using physical tools and mechanical interfaces. The sight would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. "Captain Chen," a familiar musical voice drew his attention. Princess Lirelei approached with her characteristic grace, but Marcus noticed the confident way she carried herself now, so different from the frightened refugee he had rescued from the void. "Princess," he nodded respectfully, though their relationship had grown far beyond such formalities. "How did the council meeting go?" Quote, "Better than I dared hope," she replied, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with satisfaction. "The Andromedian Coalition has agreed to join the cultural exchange program. They were initially skeptical, but the preliminary results from our joint projects convinced them that this new approach has genuine merit." The Andromedians were known throughout the galaxy as master strategists and tactical planners. Their willingness to participate meant that the exchange program was gaining momentum beyond what anyone had originally envisioned. "And the resistance factions?" Marcus asked. Not all Zephyrians had embraced the new direction their society was taking. Lirelei's expression grew more serious. Still vocal, but losing influence. "It's hard to argue against success, and our hybrid methodologies are producing results that pure traditionalism simply cannot match." She gestured toward the construction bay where the new ships were taking shape. "The first vessel will be completed next week. We've received requests from 17 different civilizations to purchase the design specifications." Marcus whistled softly. The speed at which galactic society was adapting to these new concepts was staggering. "Any word from Earth?" 170. "The Colonial Authority has authorized the construction of a permanent exchange facility in the Sol system," Lirelei said with a smile. "They want to establish formal diplomatic relations and begin large-scale technology transfer programs." This was the development Marcus had been hoping for since the project began. Earth's recognition as an equal partner, rather than a primitive backwater, would fundamentally alter humanity's position in galactic politics. "There's something else," Lirelei continued, her tone becoming more personal. "The High Council has asked me to establish a permanent embassy on Earth. They want someone who understands both human and Zephyrian thinking to serve as the primary liaison between our species." Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "And you're considering it?" "I am doing more than considering it. I have accepted." Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to warmer hues. "But I wanted to discuss it with you first, since the position would require extensive collaboration with human authorities." The implications were enormous. A Zephyrian embassy on Earth would legitimize humanity's emergence as a significant galactic power. More importantly, it would ensure that the hybrid methodologies they had developed continued to evolve and spread. "There's something I should tell you," Marcus said, making a decision he had been considering for weeks. "I've been offered a position with the new Interspecies Cooperation Initiative. They want me to help establish similar exchange programs with other civilizations. Liralay's eyes widened with surprise and delight. Marcus, that's wonderful. Though I confess I'm not entirely surprised. Your work here has impressed everyone, even those who initially opposed the program. The Interspecies Cooperation Initiative was the galaxy's first truly multicultural organization, founded on the principles that Marcus and Liralay had demonstrated during their time together. Its mission was to identify and break down the barriers that prevented different species from learning from each other. The Crystalline Collective wants to study human artistic expression, Marcus continued. They believe our chaotic creativity might enhance their architectural designs. The hive minds are interested in our individual decision-making processes. Even the Machine Intelligence Consortium wants to understand how humans and AIs might work together more effectively. As they spoke, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that day when he had answered a distress call in deep space. What had started as a simple rescue had evolved into a revolution in galactic thinking. Dr. Chen, a new voice interrupted their conversation. Marcus turned to see Commander Vex High, one of the Zephyrian military officers assigned to the Joint Defense Project. 6 months ago, Vex's High had been among the most vocal critics of human involvement in Zephyrian affairs. Now, he was one of the program's strongest advocates. Commander, Marcus nodded. How are the tactical simulations progressing? Remarkably well, Vex High admitted, his patterns betraying his excitement despite his attempt to maintain military formality. The hybrid strategies your people developed are proving 40% more effective than our traditional approaches. The combination of Zephyrian precision and human adaptability creates tactical options that neither species could achieve alone. The military applications of their collaboration had been among the most controversial aspects of the exchange program. Many Zephyrians worried about sharing their advanced technologies with a species they still considered potentially aggressive. But the results spoke for themselves. Mixed human Zephyrian crews consistently outperformed pure species teams in every simulation. There's something else, Vex High continued. We've received intelligence that the Void Hunters are mobilizing again. The High Command wants to know if the new hybrid vessels would be ready for operational deployment if needed. The Void Hunters were a nomadic species that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, appearing without warning to strip entire star systems of resources before vanishing back into the deep void between galaxies. No single civilization had ever been able to stand against them effectively. The prototypes could be operational within 2 weeks, Liralay said, after a moment's consideration. But we've never tested the hybrid technologies against Void Hunter capabilities. That may not be a choice we have, Vex High replied grimly. Our long-range sensors are detecting movement patterns consistent with a major Void Hunter incursion. If they're coming, we need every advantage we can get. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The Void Hunters represented everything that the new galactic cooperation was meant to address, a threat too large for any single species to handle alone, requiring the combined efforts of multiple civilizations to overcome. How many ships could we deploy? He asked. 12 hybrid vessels with mixed crews, Vex High replied, plus supporting fleets from 7 allied civilizations. It would be the largest cooperative military action in galactic history. The implications were staggering. If the new technologies and collaborative methods could successfully defend against the Void Hunters, it would prove once and for all that the path Marcus and Liralay had started was the right one. If they failed, there's one more thing you should know, Liralay said quietly. The hybrid crew assignments put humans in command positions throughout the fleet. Some species are still uncomfortable with the idea of taking orders from beings they considered primitive just months ago. Marcus smiled grimly. Then I guess we'd better not let them down. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity as the hybrid fleet prepared for what might be the most important battle in galactic history. Marcus found himself assigned as tactical coordinator for the entire force, a position that would have been unthinkable before the cultural exchange program began. The mixed crews worked with an efficiency that surprised even the most optimistic projections. Human adaptability, combined with Zephyrian precision, Andromedian strategy, and technologies from a dozen different civilizations, to create a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "All ships report ready for deployment," came the call from the Fleet Communications Center. Marcus looked around the command bridge of the lead vessel Times. Convergence **. Seeing faces both alien and familiar, working together with a harmony that transcended species boundaries. Void hunter formations detected at the edge of the Kepler system, the tactical officer reported. Energy signatures indicate a major incursion force. Marcus felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Everything that had begun with a simple rescue in deep space was about to be tested against the galaxy's greatest threat. "All ships, this is Captain Chen." He spoke into the fleet communications system. 6 months ago, most of us had never worked with beings from other species. Today, we stand together as proof that cooperation makes us all stronger than we could ever be alone. As the hybrid fleet moved toward its confrontation with the Void Hunters, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A frightened princess, a stubborn human, and a willingness to challenge assumptions that had shaped galactic civilization for millennia. "Fleet is in position," reported the navigation officer. "Void Hunters are beginning their attack run," added the tactical coordinator. Marcus looked at Lirelei, who was serving as the fleet's energy coordination specialist. She met his eyes and nodded, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to the fierce configurations associated with battle readiness. "All ships," Marcus called. "Show them what cooperation looks like. Engage." The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy truly became united. The Void Hunters, accustomed to facing individual species with predictable tactics and technologies, found themselves confronting something entirely new. A force that combined the strengths of multiple civilizations while covering each other's weaknesses. Human creativity and adaptability allowed the fleet to respond to unexpected threats in ways that confounded the Void Hunters' predictive models. Zephyrian energy manipulation provided power and precision that human technology could never achieve alone. Andromedian strategic thinking coordinated it all into a coherent battle plan that evolved and adapted in real time. When the last Void Hunter ship disappeared into the void, retreating from a battle they could not understand or win, the galaxy had changed forever. The old paradigm of species isolation and competition had been replaced by something new, a galactic community based on cooperation and mutual respect. "Victory confirmed," came the report from the Fleet Communications Center. "All Void Hunter forces have withdrawn beyond our sensor range." Marcus slumped in his command chair, exhaustion and relief warring in his mind. Around him, the mixed crew erupted in celebrations that transcended species boundaries. "We did it," Lirelei said, moving to stand beside him. "We actually did it." "No," Marcus corrected, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed brighter and more welcoming than they had before. "We all did it. Together." The victory against the Void Hunters marked the beginning of a new age in galactic civilization. The cultural exchange program expanded to include dozens of species, each contributing their unique perspectives and capabilities to the growing tapestry of interstellar cooperation. Marcus continued his work with the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative, traveling from system to help establish new partnerships and break down the barriers that had kept species apart for millennia. Lirelei's embassy on Earth became a model for diplomatic relations throughout the galaxy, proof that differences in thinking and culture were sources of strength rather than weakness. The hybrid technologies they had helped develop revolutionized everything from space travel to energy production, creating prosperity and possibilities that no single species could have achieved alone. More importantly, they had proven that the universe was large enough for many different approaches to truth and understanding. Years later, when historians looked back on the period known as the Great Convergence, they would identify a single moment as the turning point, the day a stubborn human captain answered a distress call from a supposedly superior alien princess, and discovered that teaching and learning could flow in both directions across the vastness of space. The galaxy was no longer a collection of isolated civilizations competing for resources and dominance. It had become something greater, a community of minds working together toward goals that none of them could achieve alone. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that Marcus and Lirelei had learned during their 100 days together in the depths of space. Sometimes the best way to help someone else is to let them help you in return. The universe, it turned out, was far more interesting when everyone had something to teach and something to learn.